everyone, and welcome back to Identity Insights by Indicio. I'm your host, Tim Spring, and today I'm joined by Indicio's newest strategic advisor, Tom Plofchan, and CEO Heather Dahl. Tom was most recently the managing partner and chief investment officer at Virginia-based Pangiam, and we're very excited to have his expertise joining us here at Indicio. I really appreciate both of you taking the time to speak with me today. I'd like to start with you, Tom. At Pangiam, you were a leader in authentication and security and really helped lead them to a successful exit. I'm curious what first interested you in Indicio?
Well, thanks for the opportunity, Tim and Heather, to talk today. And can't emphasize enough how happy I am to be a part of this team. And I know we'll talk about it and the variety of reasons why. But to kind of dive into the first question there directly, across our experience when we were at Pangiam, we looked at, and in that investment role, looked at new technologies that we could either acquire or partner with to help grow our market share. And as we did that, as we started to become more of a digital identity company, as we evolved, one of the things that we started looking at was not only facial recognition and biometrics technologies, but also decentralizing that sort of element of the market. So decentralized identity as a major opportunity for how biometrics could be used in the future. I have a background on the civil liberties side of the house. My father's a civil liberties attorney. And as I've kind of watched this space evolve, something that's been very important to me is making sure that we can create opportunities to get the benefits of digital identity, from seamlessness to access, to better customer experience, without creating these major repositories that are ripe for abuse, whether it be by private companies, governments, or simply by debt from data malfeasance or loss. So really important to me to be able to talk about the decentralized part of the conversation, not only from best use cases for customers, but also from how does tech impact, pardon me, society, and how do we implement it as technologists. So really just fell in love with the concept of what Indicio was building with the decentralized trust network from day one.
All right, very cool. Yeah, Heather, could you tell us a bit more about those early conversations and what made you really want to, bring Tom on board?
Tom and I both agree with the potential impact around privacy and especially consent over how data is used. But we also both aligned on how that can help propel businesses to success and to achieve seamless experiences that technology hasn't been able to deliver because of concerns around data consent and privacy. And so when we look to the future, we see the same vision on where decentralized identity and verifiable credentials not only provide that privacy and user consent for individuals, but we really see the tremendous impact and business growth it can offer across the board in numerous industries, and also how we can continue to build more technology to support our customers' growth going forward. And so when Tom and I have been talking, we saw that there was tremendous opportunity for him to bring his insights, not only with biometric authentication, with identity, but his views and insights on decentralized identity and how it applies to industries across the board to really lead that growth for our customers.
So you both touched on some excellent and big talking points there, particularly around biometric authentication and making it something of a business benefit, right? And business opportunities around that. I'm curious how you see verifiable credentials and biometrics really coming together to create those opportunities and what that impact will have on both the businesses and their users.
Sure. So I think, we take the most fundamental element of this, a verifiable credential can be verified in a number of ways. When you add biometrics to the equation, you are enhancing the security of that credential. You are enhancing the validity and the threshold of confidence in that validation and that verification in and of itself. And I think that's where the market is going. I also think, across multiple industries, to be clear, I also think as you look at how people use biometrics, they're using it across a disparate number of hardware providers often, with a need for facial recognition, as an example, to be hardware agnostic, to be able to be used by different cameras or different badging or access control systems against a common set of individuals who might have access or permission to enter a place or to leverage whatever the credential is allowing for. Um, One of the things this creates then is it creates a system where there is the ability for biometric providers to offer solutions that are hardware agnostic, but without a solution like Indicio, they do require a centralized database, and that is something holding the industry back. If not only the hardware is agnostic, but also the protocol for moving the credentials is decentralized, meaning there isn't anybody who has a choke point on how you go to market or how you sell, then you're actually talking about creating a network that is ubiquitous and that people all over the world across different industries can access to their individual benefit. By the way, as Heather said earlier, controlling what data they share and don't share across multiple industries. And ultimately, this puts power of usage and power of data sharing back in the hands of consumers rather than these large corporations, which we know have a propensity to sell, abuse, lose data, or governments, which I don't think anybody who's really ever studied history thinks we should actually have.
And Tim, one of the areas that we, agree is the future is that interoperability, that the lack of interoperability is what's led us to these centralized databases that don't necessarily talk. And then you have the whole set of hardware. And so that creates a situation where in one user experience from end to end, you could be providing your identity 11 different times because it doesn't communicate. And on the other hand, I think we're moving into a world where enterprises and governments are realizing from a security standpoint, why am I hoarding all this data that makes me a target when instead I can opt to a system that has been tested and built and deployed that removes that risk altogether for me and still allows me to not only accomplish what I'm doing today, but even more than what I can do and really put those visions, the sight, the goals, if the what ifs, if only we could, and it puts that in their hands in the form of a verifiable credential that can be deployed onto existing systems.
Obviously, that sounds like a great future where, we all control our own data. I'm curious if you could give me an example of how exactly do we get there, right? Obviously, what is Indicio building and how does it all kind of come together to get towards that future where you don't have to share your identity 11 times?
I think that's where Proven comes in and having the system that is a complete ecosystem that provides customers with an issuer, with a holder, with a verifier, and it gives that complete interoperable tool. And that's really where Tom and I are based our conversation on and what we talked about how we can better serve customers and the markets going forward. Tom?
Yeah, so I think that having everything from the network to the wallet, the authentication and the verification processes in one, I'm going to call it a general solution in an ecosystem, allows you to start taking on a holistic solution for industry as an individual industry. I'll take travel as an example, and I'll come back to that, or even cross industry. And I think that that's where this disparate this disparate software or disparate database problem that we talked about earlier really falls flat. You can't move it across industry. You can't move it across customer base. Oftentimes, you can't even move it between clients who want to work together in the same industry but have different focus areas. So I'll give an example. Digital credentialing for movement across borders in one way or another. And Heather can talk, much in much greater detail about some of the work Indicia has already done in this space. If you have a common ecosystem with a agreed upon protocol that both an issuer of a credential, a verifier of a credential, and the holder of their credential in their wallet have agreed upon in advance, and you have that across multiple countries, and you then therefore have the ability for multiple commercial players to step into that, you could have truly ubiquitous fidelity on data about movement across border, which is a requirement in any country you go into to share that information about who you are, where you're going, where you've come from, but allowing interoperability between all the players in the ecosystem. You could have a verifier in one or an authenticator from one nation, an verifier from another nation, and you could have your airlines and your airports or the security apparatus and the governments within that ecosystem or within that travel continuum all leveraging the exact same ecosystem, the proven concept, and being able to talk to each other all at one time. And we start talking about just the cost savings to the various entities I've just mentioned. You start talking about orders of magnitude when you start rolling out this concept at scale. And we talk about the privacy and identity protection for the individual. Rather than giving your data to all of these people, you're simply controlling elements of what is accessed. You're really talking about a game-changing concept when it comes to international travel.
When you look at, well, I'll call mainstream identity systems or legacy identity systems, when you look at federated identity systems or systems that rely on this centralized approach to providing identity, what we talk about is leapfrogging beyond that. Those types of systems have limitations. They have limitations on how data can share, limitations on who can participate, limitations in how those individuals or companies even are participating. And what this represents is just an order of magnitude of flexibility and how you can run your business, but also earn new channels of revenue because you have a larger ecosystem. Where if you're all working on common protocols with interoperability and you have agents that can communicate and talk to each other, while the entities that hold those agents can set the decision criteria that they, as an entity or an individual, will accept or not accept. That just changes the game, and not only how what we think of as traditional identity, like passports or driver's license, but any kind of data can be shared between all these participants.
Right. So I'm really curious then, because obviously Europe has been working on a broad, decentralized digital identity for its citizens for a little while now. I know Indicio has come out with a few articles about it recently. I'm curious how you see that system with the, European digital identity wallet impacting citizens and businesses, and how that's going to tie into the more global economy, as you know, Tom, you mentioned with crossing borders and all the different airlines and different things happening there.
Yeah, I'll take just a quick stab at this at a global macro level, and then I'll turn to Heather for her more nuanced expertise on what the technology and what they're doing in the European context. But the reality is, different countries around the world treat privacy and data integrity in different ways, and they put different regulations in place to this effect. The other reality is that travel and trade is inter and intra-continental and moves across the globe at all times. As everybody knows, Tom Friedman, the world is flat, right? 25 years ago. The reality that comes from those two separate realities is that if you want to be able to actually use digital identity globally on global industries, and particularly across global industries, you need to be able to deploy technology that is acceptable in the regulatory frameworks in all the jurisdictions that you want to work in. And the reality, again, of the GDPR in Europe, a couple of the jurisdictions in the United States, particularly California, some other legislation that's being considered in a number of other parts of the world, is that technologies that are not privacy by design, essentially decentralized in the digital identity space, will not be able to do business in the long term in those markets. The United States is behind in this. We have been behind on it for a long time. The Europeans are leaders on privacy and data integrity. We need to recognize that they're leaders on this. They have the right position on this from a social good perspective, a public benefit perspective for the long term. And US companies need to recognize that very quickly if they want to be able to keep up and not lose out on the technology side to the Europeans. So I'll close before turning over to Heather. You know, if US companies in the digital space, digital identity space, want access to the European market, you have to be privacy by design. You need to figure out how to be GDPR compliant. And everything that Indicio does not only allows new companies in this space to check the box in that regard from day one, but also and critically to some folks that I hope to have the chance to talk with in this new capacity. It allows a legacy actors in the United States to go back and look at their framework, their architecture, perhaps make some adjustments incorporating the network that we've built here and be immediately GDPR compliant. I'm not going to say overnight, but in a matter of weeks. And that is a really big potential opportunity to get access to that huge market that right now a lot of these folks are blocked out from.
Absolutely. And the European Union digital identity wallet is just jump starting. It's forcing the rest of the world to move forward in this manner. If anything, the European Union digital identity wallet has protocols and credential specifications specific to their regulation. And their regulation meets the use case requirements that they're setting out. Where it has to move is interoperability with the rest of the world. Some regions or even industries are using different type of credential protocols. What we have proven is that those can be interoperable. And so the future is one, if a US company, and I would say any company in the world, has anything to do with the European market, 2026, next year, the European Union digital identity wallet becomes a reality. And the fireworks are about to begin. So it's time to get your seat. It is time to get ready, or else you're going to catch yourself in a situation you have not planned for as a business, and that is critical. Second is that you have to be prepared for interoperability globally. And that is something where Indicio not only do we support OID for VC, which aligns to the European Union digital identity wallet, we also support protocols that are emerging elsewhere in the world and showing how those can actually work together and credentials can be exchanged and verified that way. And so that's how companies want to start moving forward. It's one, if you're doing business in Europe, how are you going to work with EIDAS? That's next year is going to be your reality. And then two, how are you going to provide interoperability across the world for where verifiable credentials is going? And three, like Tom said, head in sand time is over. That's done. This is a reality. I think when we saw GDPR, if you weren't in Europe, you were thinking, well, I don't really know what it is. Is it really going to impact my business? And then it was like almost overnight, it was like, oh no, this is serious. I am going to have to do something about this. It's the same thing. You may not hear as a US company about EIDAS or the European Union Digital Identity Wallet a lot, but next year it's your reality. And so, this is the great thing in working with Tom is talking about how companies in the US can change their point of views and how they're going to be interacting with Europe or other regions in the world that are moving this way, and how we can continue to move forward and catch up with where the identity market has gone.
And if I could build on that, Heather, I think that there's a great point here about the rest of the world that you touched on, right? The reality of perhaps overusing that word, but we are talking about a lot of realities in these markets that Indicio is challenging the status quo and trying to reestablish, right? Or reframe. Uh, in a number of countries around the world, and I'm going to use Africa as an example, there are increased pressures and increased efforts to create digital identity and to create identity products for people. Oftentimes, these are framed in the use or in the context of creating a public utility. So, being able to make sure that people get the benefits from a state program that they are entitled to, things from telecom to food handouts, depending on the country in question and where the money's coming from. Often UN or other international organizations sponsored. The problem with this construct for Africa writ large and for other parts of the world that are less fortunate than those of us in the United States and Europe, as we've talked about so far, where Europe has their own kind of ability through GDPR to set their own target for how they want to approach this problem and protect data and personal liberty, civil liberties, and privacy, and they've done so with GDPR. And the U.S. obviously has the same rights and ability, and certain jurisdictions have started to do so. The context has been set for these other parts of the world that don't have as robust institutions protecting individual rights. Essentially, that if you want the benefits of digital identity, thou shalt take centralized repositories. You shall take additional scrutiny, almost surveillance state type programs in return for these benefits. And so, what we're creating if we don't solve this problem. And it's one of the things I really like about Indicio as a public benefit company is that we are solving this problem for the world. In that other context, what we are creating is a world of have and have nots that is essentially westernized countries and the global south separated from each other based on privacy and individual rights because centralizing companies and authoritarian states will increasingly take over control of individuals' data in those parts of the world, but not in Europe and the United States and other similar partners. And that's not the way that we want to think about this problem holistically as humans that are going to interact with each other all the way around the globe, for the rest of our existence. And so I think that what we're trying to build here in a network that reaches global scale is a solution to the problem that comes with centralization and corruption that comes along with centralization in any instance that you can study across history.
And the centralized legacy systems, they're heavy. They're a heavy amount of technology, the cost, the implementation, the amount of expense. And so that's part of the trade-off that is being made. What this allows is when you think back to the emergence of mobile devices, many emerging nations just went straight from not even at that point installing landlines anymore, straight to the mobile device, right? More affordable, more agile, something that they could implement quickly because they just didn't have the infrastructure. What Verifiable Credentials offers is exactly that for emerging nations who don't want to have that spend for developing a heavy identity infrastructure, primarily because that identity infrastructure is dependent on expensive legacy technology that is requiring individuals to give up their data or control of their data simply to have the opportunity to have identity.
It's a great point. I have a map of the African continent on my wall on the other side of the screen here, and I'm looking at it, and I'm thinking about the RFPs I've seen from federal governments on a handful of Western African countries for centralized database programs, and I'm thinking now to your point, the cost of those, and the fact, frankly, most of that work goes to foreign companies anyway, so it's not benefiting the local economy to put it in place. Whereas, in addition to all the philosophical things, if I use that term, that I was highlighting on the benefit of a public benefit corporation, the cost to companies of what the Proven Network is putting together, what Indicio is doing holistically, is really just you're not even comparing apples to apples. You're talking about an entirely different type of solution from a cost perspective to the taxpayers and citizens of those countries.
So, Tom, I know coming from a background, with biometrics and with authentication, really diving into that from, the leadership perspective and in dealing with all the users. I'm curious your thoughts on AI and, new impersonation attack methods, particularly in terms of deepfakes and how the technology that Indicio is building and verifiable credentials and a better identity system would kind of help with where we're at with AI right now.
So I'm by no means an expert in deep fakes and some of the risk that's coming out of the recent developments that we're hearing about in AI and the uses for exploitation. Um, that said, where I think there's potential space here is as you incorporate biometrics into verifiable credentials, as I talked about earlier, you create a higher threshold of verification that increases the confidence level of the verifier that the person that there is in front of them or is presenting it is in fact who they say they are. Um, you can relatively simply, along with facial recognition or other biometrics, you can incorporate liveness into that process as well from a technical perspective. Really doing a lot of work as a result to make sure that there isn't there aren't a variety of spoofing attempts that many of which are AI enabled and are being used to exploit basic camera systems or basic enrollment systems today. So being able to prove not only that's Tom's face, but Tom was real when he was there. You don't always have to do it that way, or is real and in person in this moment when he's verifying, is a relatively easy integration between facial recognition and a liveness capacity, and then into a verifiable credential. And if you can offer that, then particularly at point of presence interactions or places where you don't even have to be point of presence, it can be entirely digital, but you're logging in and you're willing to demonstrate that liveness. It's very hard for an AI to spoof that at the moment. And I know there are some expert companies in the space, many of whom I know well and have worked with. To the best of my knowledge, they're staying ahead of that threat with a lot of work to do so.
For the individual who is using the AI systems as something as I'm going to call it, V1 chatbots, for instance, what a verifiable credential does is add to the user experience, not only from the security standpoint of proving that I truly who am who I say I am, but the other standpoint, am I engaged with the authorized AI on behalf of the entity in which I think I'm engaging with?
Yeah.
And the next step is the data that is being put into the experience, is that being inferred about me from centralized databases or other forms of analytics that are actually incorrect or dated, or they just don't even know? Or are they moving into a space where I'm still engaged, but I'm still doing manual entry about information that should just be able to be pulled from a credential? If I look at travel experience and some AI, early AI tools and chatbots, and they're asking me for my 16-digit ticket number. I fly a lot. I still don't even know my 16-digit ticket number. So, what benefit is that truly bringing and saving their customer service time or creating a better customer experience? That's where a verifiable credential could come in because I can have a credential with my ticket number, my passport information, my preferences, across regardless of what airline I'm flying, and all of that can be pulled into not only a chatbot interaction, but other AI type of solutions. So one of the things I always find interesting is that when we're going into the next generation of technology, what is the one thing we love to ignore? Identity. We just pull the same old identity solutions from Web 2. We just pull it on through. We're going to go Web 3. Oh, but we'll centralize the identity on decentralized assets. Yeah, AI, well, we're just going to pull the same centralized dated identity solutions on with us. And guess what? You really, truly are not getting ahead and solving the problems. You're just making the Web 2 problem even worse and holding yourselves back. Or they're like kind of centralized approaches that we're going to go out and we're going to go collect all that data from individuals and then we're going to bring it in-house. Well, that adds a lot of friction that you could just solve with a verifiable credential on a mobile device. So one of the areas of AI that I think is often missed, especially in conversations about, analysts in this space, is what is AI doing about identity that is novel, that is moving things forward, that's creating things seamlessly, and doing it with the emerging privacy regulations top of mind, and two, doing it in a way that allows individuals and people to provide user consent and management of their data across their AI experiences. And when you start talking about those to analysts or people watching this space, and they're like, I don't know, I don't ask about it. It's extremely important because the success of AI, the success of that market depends on the identity data that is being pulled into those solutions.
So I'd just like to throw out to any potential partners, customers working in the digital identity space. If you're concerned about interoperability, if you're concerned from a U.S. perspective about GDPR compliance, other international compliance, if you're looking for a network that you can build with that allows you to access and serve clients across sector and across industry, please feel free to reach out. I'm at tom@indicio.tech. Happy to chat at any time and looking forward to helping you build this network and building it together.
And we're really happy to have you as a part of the team, Tom, as a strategic advisor. And absolutely, people should reach out and work with you in solving some of their problems around interoperability, the adoption of verifiable credentials, and the benefits it can bring.
So great to be here and be on the team. Thanks, Heather.
Awesome. Well, thank you both. Those were some excellent points brought up and definitely make me excited for the future of decentralized identity and what Indicio is going to really get done this year. Uh, Thank you both for taking the time to join me and share all these thoughts with our audience today. If you at home are interested in learning a bit more about decentralized identity and verifiable credential technology, please be sure to subscribe to the channel and we'll continue to bring you some more educational content. If you have any questions or specific topics that you'd like for us to cover, go ahead and leave a comment below and we'll be sure to read and address them. Thank you all for watching.